Who do you submit to? All of us, whether we know it or not, are submitting to something or someone on a daily basis. And the reason that this is important is because whatever or whoever you submit to will be the thing that drives, that steers the direction of your life. And the caveat is whether you acknowledge that you're submitting to it or not, doesn't matter. The thing or the person you submit to will drive and steer the direction of your life. So obviously it's very important. So we want to talk about today the reality of submission and why no one is truly independent. We want to talk about how understanding submission improves relationships and decision making. Want to talk about the consequences of submitting to the wrong things. And I want to submit to you what I believe we should all consider submitting to in order to have a more effective, more efficient life. So the reality of submission is that everyone, again, submits to something, whether consciously or unconsciously. Your you not being aware that you're submitting to something or someone doesn't negate the fact that you are submitting to that thing or that person. What are some common things that people submit to? People submit to God, which means faith, purpose, eternal accountability, what have you. Some people submit, and again, as I list these things, you may be submitting to all of these things at various points in your life or all in one day, right? So another thing people submit to is money, success, greed, materialism, stress, i.e., these are the things that are associated with submitting to money. Some people submit to comfort, laziness, mediocrity, stagnation. Again, all things that could be associated with submitting to comfort, first and foremost. Some people submit to themselves, which then leads to self-reliance, ego, and potentially loneliness. Some people submit to, society and culture, which leads to peer pressure and external validation, right? So all of those things are different examples of what people submit to knowingly or unknowingly. And again, you could find yourself submitting to one or two of these things, all of these things. Again, look at your life, look at the history of your life up until today. At some point in time, all of us will be submitting to some of these things or something else, right? And even people who claim they don't submit to anything or anyone are still influenced by something. So we can tell what you're submitted to by what is influencing you, right? What is the thing that's driving your decisions, your thoughts, your actions, or lack thereof? You are submitting to something or someone, whether you verbally acknowledge that, whether you consciously understand that. We're all submitting to something or someone. Knowing what you're submitted to or who you're submitted to strengthens relationships. So let's park there for a minute. Let's talk about that. So knowing what you're submitted to or who you're submitted to eliminates unnecessary conflict, right? So many disagreements happen because people talk past each other rather than addressing core values, right? You know, we've heard the example of missionaries. I'll use this, and I don't mean this to be a crude example, but this is just the first example that pops into my head. So we've heard stories, or we've been a part of certain missionary Christian outreach where people are who are believers or Christians or whatever their faith, how they define their faith, they are taking Bibles and ministering to people, trying to lead them to Jesus and what have you. But the people that they're trying to minister to may have other pressing needs that are at the forefront of their mind. They may be hungry, they may be homeless. And so oftentimes, in an effort to reach them, we talk and steer past their immediate needs in the name of, well, you need Jesus. Yes, you need Jesus, but they might need a sandwich first that will allow them to receive the Jesus that you're bringing to them. So it's so important to understand the hierarchy of the value system that a person may have. And again, if you're hungry and you don't know when the last sandwich you had or when the next sandwich is coming, that is what is steering your life at that moment. You're trying to figure out, how can I get to the sandwich? How can I get to the yams? Right? So understanding what somebody submits to at any given moment allows us to be a little bit more empathetic and tailor our message, what we're trying to communicate, by understanding what is most important to them in this given moment. And it really eliminates, and let's continue. So if you know what someone submits to, you won't waste time arguing in ways they don't respect. So all of us are individuals and have this individual experience of walking through life. And we all, again, have a value system. So if you're trying to communicate with someone, or even you might find yourself in an argument with someone, and your point might be correct, this might be a truth that you're trying to present to someone, but if their value system, the thing that they respect the most, is they're filtering what you're saying through those lenses, or through those lenses, their mind's eye, we'll put it like that. So you're trying to explain something which actually may be valuable and or true, but we're all filtering it through the things that we value most. So the thing we value most is what we are submitted to typically. So finding out what somebody is submitted to tailors your communication with them, and it eliminates the need to press and to get into unnecessary distractions via argument, because you're trying to communicate something that they don't even value. You're trying to communicate in a way using something that you value that they may not value. Knowing what they submit to, what they value in their life, allows you to avoid certain distractions and conflict, and get to the core, the heart of what it is you're trying to present. Um, for example, somebody who submits to power won't care as much about fairness. And we're not getting into a debate about if what they submit to you agree with. It's just how a person is wired. And if you endeavor to connect with people, you have to recognize that all of us are wired differently. So if somebody submits to the idea of power, talking to them about fairness is a useless argument, right? So again, we're trying to examine, what do people submit to, who do people submit to, and how knowing that information tells you really essentially what you need to know about these people, so that you can connect with them, so that you can then impart the wisdom that you're trying to bring, the knowledge that you're trying to bring, or just connect with them in an interpersonal way. Empathy, compassion, you know, all good things come from being able to understand who and what someone submits to, including understanding yourself better. Understanding what someone or who someone submits to improves communication influence. That's what we're talking about. When you understand what drives a person, you can frame conversations in a way that resonates with them rather than clashes with their beliefs. It is so hard to, quote unquote, convince somebody of something if you don't know what's important to them as parents. For example, I had a situation with my daughter today where we were trying to make some decisions about dropping her off at school. And rather than trying to convince her that, and I tried to convince her that what I would suggest, what she should do, so forth and so on, would be the best decision for her. And then we arrived at the point where my theory was put to the test. And I recognized in that moment that the thing she valued most was in that scenario. I had to recognize what she valued most in that particular scenario. And then I ended up changing my decision. Without going into detail about it, experiencing life through her lens by understanding what was most important to her in that moment allowed me to see a different perspective. And it wasn't about right or wrong. It was just about seeing a person's perspective based on what they value most in that moment. And rather than trying to do two things at one time, you're trying to convince somebody that what you think and believe is right by bypassing what they value, you're trying to get them to release what they value most to listen to what you think they should do. It's a double whammy. Understand their perspective by being empathetic and walking in their shoes if you're given the opportunity. And then you can tailor make your decision, what you're offering to them, by first understanding their point of view, by what they submit to, what's most important, what do they value the most. Here's another example. If a business partner submits to financial success, frame decisions around profitability, not ethics. Does that mean profit over ethics is a good thing? Not necessarily, but if you're running a business, you're in it for profit. And that doesn't suggest that you should take shortcuts on your ethics, because I don't believe that. I believe character before any and everything. But we're just using it as an example. If you're working with someone in a business capacity and their mind frame is on profits first and foremost, then is there a way that you can shift your language, your tonality, to approach it from what they do understand so that they can then understand something new that you're trying to present to them? I hope that makes sense to you. I hope that you can see how understanding what someone submits to or who they submit to allows you to communicate with them more effectively, thereby putting everybody in a position to change and grow and to elevate. So we've talked about professional environments. Let's talk about romantic and personal relationships. So I believe through experience and from what I've gleaned from talking to various people and just walking this life thing out, I believe that most couples clash because they unknowingly submit to different things. You will find in marriage that at the end of the day, between two people, typically, not always, both of them are right and both of them are wrong. So, you lose when it becomes this tit for tat. Well, you did this and you did that. Well, what about this and what about that? You can go on and on and on ad nauseum with that type of ideology and behavior. So, what do we do? What's the difference maker? The difference maker is when we can understand that he or she may value something different than you do, right? So we're moving away from right or wrong. You can get to that down the line. But if you start with the reality that they value things that I don't necessarily value and vice versa, and then coming to an understanding and making an attempt to try to understand why they value that versus this or that or the other, it puts you in a total different perspective. You see things differently. And if you see things differently, then you can do things differently. So, for example, if one person in the relationship, is really submitted to the idea of growing personally in the unit and just everything that they stand for is about growth, and one person submits to comfort, I mean, you're going to have some tension. You're going to have tension. So it's none of us can change anybody per se. We have a hard enough time trying to change ourselves. So before you get into the useless, pointless argument of trying to change what somebody does, you have to speak to them from a place of understanding why they do what they do. And how do we understand why they do what they do? We understand that better when we understand who or what they submit to. When we understand those differences, it allows for intentional conversations, compromises, and realistic expectations. And that's the goal for every single partnership, relationship, business, personal, with oneself. We're trying to get to realistic expectations. nobody wants to continuously add more pressure and unnecessary weight on anything or anybody. So understanding the differences allows for intentional conversations, compromises, and realistic expectations. Understanding these differences prevents wasted effort in business and in leadership. A great leader understands different motivations. Some people work hard for legacy and purpose. Others chase money and prestige. Some just want peace and a great work-life balance. If you're a leader, if you're an employer, or if you lead people in any endeavor, understanding why they're working with and for you is paramount. You can't, you can try, but you will have turnover. You will have, people won't want to work for you. Let me rephrase that. People want to work with you and for you when they first feel understood. And one of the things that I have prided myself on, for lack of a better term, in every area of leadership in my life is that I'm trying, I'm seeking to understand before I seek to be understood. And it's a dance. It's delicate. I'm not suggesting that at the expense of the business or the endeavor that you sit around patiently waiting for people to figure out or to tell you or to discover what it is they value most. I'm not telling you that. What I'm telling you is that when you seek to first understand before you are understood, you create an atmosphere where the magic happens when people feel seen. And we can make people feel seen in so many different ways. And I humbly invite you or encourage you to find different ways to make people feel seen, and you will be amazed at how much they open up to you. And anytime somebody opens up to you, you're then left with in a position to then present them with something that can help them that they may have never known before. Whatever, it's a win-win situation. Knowing all of that allows you to motivate people far more effectively and avoid frustration. So we've talked about the various things and people and entities that people submit to, and why understanding that matters. Let's talk about some of the consequences of submission. The bottom line is we all will answer to who and what we submit to. Let's talk about some various examples. Submission to comfort, you're going to have to answer to mediocrity and poor health. I'll say that again. If we submit to comfort, we're going to have to answer to mediocrity and poor health. If we submit to money, we have to answer to stress and dissatisfaction. If we submit to ourselves, we've got to answer to loneliness and lack of guidance. So we can understand now, hopefully, that whatever we submit to, we're going to have to answer to what that submission brings to our lives, right? So it is so important for us to decide for ourselves, either, from the grand perspective and from the micro perspective, meaning that at the end of my life, I want my life to look like X. Okay, so we start there. Then we back it up to wherever we are now, and we say, okay, to get to that end result, I will submit to X on a daily, monthly, weekly, yearly basis, all in an effort to end up there. So we're submitting to the whole as well as to the minutia, for lack of a better term, of what it looks like daily. What do we have to submit to daily in order to get to that end result, right? So it's so important for us to decide, because whether you decide or not, a decision is going to be made on who or what you're going to submit to. And you can think you're the strongest, most self-reliant person walking the face of the earth. You are submitting to something that you will then have to answer to or answer for. So it's so important for us to decide who and what we're going to submit to. And it's a wonderful thing that we get to make that decision. It's such a wonderful thing that we get to make that decision. The importance of intentionally choosing the right master instead of letting something control you unconsciously. So, you know, one of the stories I like to tell is that my father, whenever we would have the conversation about drugs or alcohol, he would tell me that, most of my life, I've never seen my father drink, right? I'm certain that he drank at a certain point of his life. I'm certain that he potentially engaged in some recreational narcotic at some point in his life. But as a man, as a father, I never saw my father engage in any of that activity. And so I would ask him when we would talk about it as I was coming of age and, being presented with all of those options. And what he told me and stuck with me, what I share with my children, is that the reason he decided not to engage with those types of things is because he never wanted to be controlled by those things. And he also never wanted to be left vulnerable to being controlled by others under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So what did that teach me? That teaches me that I get to decide who and what controls me. I get to decide. You get to decide. So it's so important for us to daily make the decision who or what are we going to submit to. If you submit to drugs and alcohol, then you're answering to health issues. You're answering to potentially having other people control your destiny and your daily life, right? So the point that I'm driving home is that you get to decide who and what you get to submit to. Having said all of that, the logical choice is to submit to something or someone that is immovable. For me, that's my submission to God, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Everything in this life can and will change. And if you submit to something that's fickle, then you will have to ebb and flow with the fickle nature of whatever it is you're submitting to. Some days you're in the money, some days you're out of the money. Some days people love you, some days people hate you. Some days the sky is sunny, the next day is gray and rainy. Don't submit to things that are movable. Submit to the one thing in this world that's immovable. Submission to God leads to freedom. Submitting to worldly things will shackle you to the ebb and flow, the up and down of those worldly things. Submission to God requires faith, and faith provides direction, a moral compass, and purpose, a north star that when you get lost and the days are dark and gray, you can look up to that north star and remember, no, this is the direction that I'm headed in. Faith provides accountability, a higher standard beyond fleeting human desires. Faith provides peace. Unlike submission to material things, submission to God offers eternal fulfillment. Whether you believe in an afterlife, heaven, and so forth and so on is irrelevant, because when it's all said and done, whether you believe it or not, you're going to come face to face with the reality of its existence. So submission to God leads to a peace, knowing that beyond what I see and experience now, there is something else. There is an eternity, right? So lastly, we want to talk about, I want to challenge you. I want to ask you to look at your life, and I want you to ask yourself who or what is steering the ship of your life. And are you happy with where it's headed? And if the answer is yes, then keep on keeping on. If the answer is no, after you've examined who or what is steering the ship of your life, you get to decide now. The decision was always yours. You get to decide who or what is steering the direction of your life. And maybe in another video, I'll tackle the concept of marital submission, husbands submitting to their wives, dying to their wives, like Christ died for the church, wives submitting to their husbands as an act to honor God, and so forth and so on. And that's another subject I'd love to talk about it. Let me know in the comments if you want to have that conversation. But for right now, I'll leave that one alone. So, as an individual, as a leader, as a husband, as a wife, as a student, as an entrepreneur, whatever role or title you find yourself, whatever crown you find yourself wearing right now, ask yourself who or what is steering the direction of your life. And if you don't like the fruit, then don't try to, take this rotten fruit and paint it and then call it something else. No, 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 no. If you don't like the fruit you're getting, change what's happening, change the roots, uproot it, uproot it, and plant something new. So I hope this video, this podcast has helped you. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know if this has helped you. And please don't just listen to this and then, scroll to the next self-help video or whatever you want to call it, so-called self-help video, and then get another hit or boost of dopamine. Actually do what I'm asking you to do, which is examine your life and ask yourself who or what is directing it. Not necessarily on the surface, but go a little bit deeper. Ask yourself, why am I constantly here, there? How am I getting here? You're getting there because something is steering the ship in that direction. So get to the root of that. And then if you don't like that direction, cut it off. Make a decision. Decide. And once you decide, that word essentially means you're cutting yourself off from anything else. When you decide, I want to go in this direction, then submit to the process, submit to the God that is the only entity that can help you get there. And once you submit to God, He will direct your path. He will provide. He will put people and opportunities and places and circumstances in your life to corroborate what He already planted in your heart. Right? So again, thank you all for checking this out. One more thing, we're going to move the drop date. We're going to start dropping on Fridays moving forward. So excited to have been on this journey with you all. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And until the next video, peace.